Well, welcome everyone. First of all, we have as I said, I was joking, it's June, a lot of people are away, my family is away. But I really appreciate you guys coming out tonight. So, hopefully this all works. Quick introduction, my name is Wilson Kerr. Some of you might know I write a column for The Bridge called Time Outdoors. Thank you very much. And I am just a dad. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a biologist. The information you're going to see tonight was looked up by me. I have sources listed at the end. You can look up all the same things. But this is something that is sort of near and dear to my heart and something that I feel very strongly about. So I'll start off with a little icebreaker. Quick show of hands. Who in the room, and leave your hands up, who in your room has ever dealt with any form of cancer personally? Who? No, who? Okay, leave your hands up. Who in this room has a relative that has had cancer? Okay, now, other than Stefan, has anyone, and leave your hands up, anyone with Hodgkin's disease? Leave them up. Okay, pretty much, I'd say 99% of this room just raised their hands. We know someone who has cancer, okay? This is a very unique issue to the United States. In many other countries in the world, you wouldn't see that. And the question is why? And this talk tonight is not about assigning cause or blame, but it's about doing something very simple that we can all do to change to, in my opinion, greatly limit that show of hands we just saw. My research, as I said, is my own, and it's all sourced at the end. And then I want to just touch on why I'm doing this. I gave this talk last March to Concord Can, and the library asked me to do it again tonight, and it's being recorded for Minuteman, so hopefully more people will see it. Concord is the home of great thinkers. It is the home of environmentalists, of existential thinking. It's the home of Thoreau. And to be in a town as beautiful as Concord, and see these yellow signs, it's just something that I think we need to talk about and something that we could perhaps do something about. And I have some sort of dreams and promises I've made my little daughters about trying to address this issue. This started for me because when I was in 9th grade, I read Silent Spring in an environmental science class in 9th grade, and it really did change my life. Silent Spring, of course, by Rachel Carson. I'm sure most people here are familiar with it, published in 1962. This is a brave woman who was up against a just colossus of chemical companies, and her big story, of course, is the successful banning of DDT, a very toxic chemical. But she really sort of broke the doors open. So as like I said, we have Concord. It's a beautiful town. But what I see every spring, it happens this time of year, I go for runs at night in the neighborhood. Sometimes I can smell it as I get to the yards, is these signs. And they are all over the place. I particularly notice it in signs in yards that have playground material, bikes lying in the grass, and small kids, and pets. So what we're going to cover tonight, pesticide use stats. The stats are kind of shocking, but no talk about pesticides would be complete without level setting on exactly how much pesticides we're talking about. Lawn and garden pesticides, neonics in particular, mosquito spraying, and weed killers. I want to also say that I am focusing on residential pesticide use. We're not going to talk about the farms and farming in the Midwest and farms. These things are, it's sort of a larger subject. We're also going to talk about alternatives. This is not a doom and gloom talk where we just learn about these horrible things and all go out shaking our head. What can we actually do to help solve this problem? And then we're going to talk about current regulations, the state of affairs, and there's some very good news, especially here in Massachusetts. And then, like I said before, what is the path forward? What do we come out of here thinking we're going to do? For each of us, that's very different. There are certain risks with putting yourself out there. You know, I know Sven and his leaf blower ban. That took a lot of risk. I talked to him about that, and he said, first thing you have to do is get tough skin. We just went through the SGAR ban with Article 36, and I was proud to be a part of that steering committee. Things can be done when citizens put their heads together and have information. So here come the stats. 1 billion pounds of pesticides are used annually in the United States, and of that, 80 million pounds are used by homeowners on 40 million acres of yards. We all know that yards are sort of seen as a status symbol by many people. If you go around certain neighborhoods, this is a legacy from England. The yard meant you didn't have to till your land or plant crops. You could show off the fact that you just had empty land full of grass. It's a very unique sort of American thing to have a perfect yard devoid of all clover or other species of life. Lawns and gardens receive 3 to 10 pounds of pesticides and herbicides per acre, while agriculture gets just 2.7 pounds. So fields, people think they're sort of the boogeyman, the farmers, soybeans and crops, and you hear about that. Yes, a lot of pesticides used, but lawns are by far a higher concentration. Total U.S. pesticide sales are $24 billion, and $4 billion is spent annually on yards. So $1 billion sounds like a lot. It's 1,000 million, but it's very hard to get that in perspective. So I did this little exercise. Imagine if I had a 100-pound bag of, let's call it powder, some evil powder, and it was pesticide. And in that day, if I were to get a little plane or something and fly up and dump scoops of this out over the landscape, how many days would it take me at 100 pounds a day, which would take some considerate effort, to spread a billion pounds of pesticide? The answer is 27,397 years. That's how long it would take me at a 100-pound bag of pesticide a day if I just started on my effort. And that's applied annually in the United States. So I want to talk about greenwashing and this concept. This was a term coined by an environmentalist in 1986, and he wrote an essay about sort of the Save the Towel movement in hotels. And he noticed the waste and thought this was sort of a strange thing these hotels were doing. We see examples with clean diesel. And basically what greenwashing is, it's an unsupported claim to deceive consumers into believing that a company's products are environmentally friendly or have a greater positive impact than what is true. And we see it all the time. Everything is free. Everything is naturally derived. That's a big one we're going to talk about today. Naturally derived, right? Gasoline is naturally derived, but if I drank a gallon of it, I'd be pretty sick. So is arsenic, right? It's all naturally derived. So greenwashing is something that the pesticide industry uses extensively. So here's a little quiz. What company described their services, and this is all from a lawsuit, you can look it up, the sources there on the bottom, and by the way, I can send this slide deck to anyone who wants to take a look at it or use it. Environmentally friendly, sustainable lawn care services that use no chemicals that may cause cancer, allergic reactions, or other health or environmental harms. They were sued for saying this. Okay. ChemLawn, largest lawn care company in the United States, and they've rebranded themselves as True Green. All right, it makes a lot of sense why they would do that. Pets on the trucks, and they were sued by Beyond Pesticides. I think it was in 2020. That's an organization that sued them for saying this. Okay. So be very careful about lawn care companies. Most of the signs you see are not put out by homeowners. They're put out by lawn care companies after they are doing a lawn care service. If you don't know what that service is, you should. If you have neighbors that have these little yellow signs up and they say, I don't know what that stuff is, I don't know, they just come and the lawn looks pretty good to me. They should understand what that is, and we're going to talk more about that. I meant to say at the beginning of my introduction that I have a direct neighbor. I live over on Damon Street. We're very, very close neighbors with our right next door. I mean, literally 6 feet away is our grass. And I have little girls, and when we first moved in, they were running across the grass, of course, in bare feet. And our direct neighbor had these signs up, and you could smell it, and it came in our windows. And I went and spoke with him. And he's a great guy, and he said, you know, my mom signed up for that service years and years ago. I have no idea what they do every month. So I found out what company is. They will go unnamed, and I called them, and I did a little spy exercise. And I said, my neighbor uses you guys, and I noticed your service. Can you tell me about what your service is? And this salesperson pulled me right up on Google Maps, asked for my address, saw bikes and stuff in the yard, and he immediately started saying, do you mind biting insects for your children? He started selling me on fear and this notion of protecting your yard against insects. when I pressed him, he did admit that what they use is these pesticides. So what are the pesticides? The names are kind of hard to pronounce. Yard insecticides that are used by these lawn care companies include the following, okay? If you have a company that you've hired to do things and they're using some of these, this is the number one that you'll see. Imidacloprid. I'm going to go for it. Imidacloprid, okay? The toxicity is across here. It says mammals. We are mammals, right? This is a good example. They say toxic to mammals. You're like, well, pets are mammals, okay? So it might as well at the end say toxic to humans and pets. And as you can see here, most of the most commonly used, they're detected in groundwater. They're potential leachers, meaning they create these plumes. All of them, except permethrin, are toxic to birds. All of them are toxic to aquatic organisms and fish. All of them are highly toxic to bees. All of them. And imidacloprid so far is ruled up, we'll get to it at the end, a probable carcinogen, but it has not been officially ruled as carcinogenic. Every other one of them is toxic to humans and pets. That's why they have to put up the signs. They wouldn't have to put up the signs that say, keep off, don't touch this stuff, if it weren't toxic to humans. Herbicides, weed killers. Okay, these are the most common. There's tons of them. This is, that one right there, that's Agent Orange. Okay, toxic to humans, toxic to pets. Okay, glyphosate, Roundup, toxic to all of them. That's number one by far. And we'll talk a little bit more about that one. So let's talk about neonics. Okay, this is a super toxic group of pesticides that has sort of revolutionized the industry. So the way to pronounce is nicotinoids. We call them neonics because it's too hard to pronounce. They're used in over 140 agricultural crops. They coat the seeds in them, and they're widely sold for residential use. Not in Massachusetts, and we'll get to that, but in most places. They attack the central nervous system of the insect, and then it's paralysis and death for the bugs. They're systemic. This is really important to understand. When those granules get out, you can't buy neonics in Massachusetts, but your lawn care company can 100% use them. They put out those granules, and those granules get absorbed into the soil when it rains. Then the plant takes them up as a nutrient, and the plant essentially becomes a delivery mechanism for the toxicity out to everything that touches it. And of course, what picks up what off of plants and takes them back and make honey for it? That's the bees, right? This is, you're basically turning the plants that absorb this into delivery mechanisms for the toxins. Only 5% stay in the plant, the rest enters the environment of neonics. The half-life in soil is 3 years. Okay, when you spread this stuff down and you put those pellets down, it rains, it soaks in, they did their job, put their sign up, and they leave. 3 years later, it's still in the soil. And those are the most popular ones. One thing to talk about the soil, when you poison the soil all the way down, you are poisoning the microbiome of the earth. You're killing the bugs. Oh, there's no ants anymore. I'm not getting stung. That's great, but you are killing everything. One of the things I noticed, and I was just walking over on Domino Drive today, and the whole development over there sprays and puts down these pellets. The yards that use this stuff look horrible. I don't know if anyone's noticed this. Sometimes you see that lush, perfect green, but a lot of times you see those bare patches. And I've heard anecdotally people say that what the thing is, oh, come back, oh, you know, you've got this, you've got that, and it's this endless cycle of upselling for adding more to it. The yards that I see, including our direct neighbor who no longer uses it, just looked horrible. Covered in brown patches. When I ride my bike into town from West Concord, I see the ones that have the signs up. It's almost universal. And here's the real punchline. Neonic pesticides were detected in the blood of 50% of US children aged 3 to 5. Okay, this stuff is really nasty. So here's one example of this neonic. Where do you see it? It is everywhere. You've seen all these things for sale. Massachusetts is And this is the one, again, you remember my chart? It's not rated, but here, I just looked this up today, laboratory rat studies. It's rated as moderately toxic acute oral basis to mammals, unlikely carcinogen. Remember, DDT wasn't called a carcinogen, and glyphosate wasn't originally. They are now. So we keep talking about DDT and neonics, and this is where I get the title for my talk tonight. This is a great quote. This is the second silent spring. Neonics are like a new DDT, except they are 1,000 times more toxic to bees than DDT was. Think of that. It's not twice as toxic as DDT, this boogeyman bad guy that we all talk about as this incredible success story, banned, I think, in 1972. We all know how it cascaded up. The little bugs fell into the water. The trout ate the bugs. The bigger fish ate the little fish. It went up, 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 up. And then the ospreys and the eagles and the hawks ate those bigger fish. And it disrupted their ability to have eggs that were firm. When they sat on the eggs, they were wiped out. Ospreys almost extinct, eagles almost extinct, and that's really what, and not to mention everything else that DDT killed. These things are 1,000 times more toxic. And this 1,000 times rise in toxicity matches in the sharp decline we've seen in bees, butterflies, and other pollinators, as well as birds. So let's talk about mosquito spraying. We've seen those signs all over the place. I'm just not calling anyone out here. I'm just pulling up the ones I see. I see them all over the place. They tend to sort of spread. When you see one up, then you go back a few weeks later, they're spreading all over. The chemicals used in these mosquito sprays is almost always some kind of pimethroid, okay? And these are some of the different common ones. These are the ones that these different companies use. And they are pimethroids. We talked about greenwashing. Pimethroids are a synthesized chemical that is derived from the naturally occurring insecticide in a chrysanthemum plant, okay? That's why they're called naturally derived. They're synthetic. They're naturally derived because they mimic this chemical in a chrysanthemum plant. And that allows them to make a lot of claims. So there's the greenwashing alert, okay? Don't worry, everything we do is naturally derived. We only use naturally derived products. That's pimethrin. Stuff is super, super toxic. It kills everything that you spray on, okay? If you call one of these companies, there's lots of them, and they spray your trees and your yards and your shrubs, awesome, no more mosquitoes. Also, no more butterflies, no more fireflies, no more spiders, no more worms, nothing. It kills everything on contact. It's highly toxic to cats, and the real toxicity to it is to aquatic life. Okay, I should mention that pimethrin is a highly effective, once dried spray that you can put on your clothes for tick prevention. The company Buzz Off created a line of clothing like this shirt, and it's infused with pimethrin. Pimethrin, once it's dried, is hard to get into the system, okay? And it's rated as non-toxic to humans. So the dangers of these yard spraying are not to people, okay? Highly toxic to cats. If you have a lake or a pond or a river running by and you're spraying it in there, that's not good. But the real bad news about the pimethroids is that they kill everything. So when when the birds are trying to find food for their babies, it's hard to find. It kills every single bug on your property. So if you're choosing to spray for mosquitoes, it's effective. Ticks also, but you're basically choosing to kill every single bug in your property on contact. There's one study I could find that has linked possibly pimethroid exposure to higher levels of ADD in boys. Okay, but it's very recent. And then we talked about the neighbor effect. I go to these neighborhoods, you see one mosquito sign, and then boom, 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 boom. They put the sign up for free. Everyone says, oh man, they chose to have no mosquitoes, take back the summer, whatever the slogan is, and it tends to spread. Yard herbicides. These are weed killers. Almost all Roundup is, of course, the big one. Glyphosate. Glyphosate for years and years and years was deemed totally safe. There was this crazy video that was viral where one of the manufacturers of glyphosate, it's Monsanto, had a glass. The reporter brought a glass to him. And he said, it's totally safe. And he said, well, would you drink a glass of it? The guy said, no, I'm not drinking that. These are some of the different ones. We already talked about them. Glyphosate is really the most popular toxic pesticide. It's used on crops for weed control. It's the active ingredient in, of course, Monsanto's Roundup that you can buy. New research shows that childhood exposure to glyphosate linked to liver inflammation, metabolic disorder in early childhood, could lead to liver diabetes, all sorts of bad stuff. Just saw this report today, I added that. CNN, common weed killer glyphosate increases cancer risk by 41%. That's a CNN headline from last year. Lawsuits. Bayer, who owns Monsanto, the parent company, has paid $11 billion to settle 100,000 Roundup cases so far in the United States. You don't settle unless you've got an issue. And there's 67,000 open cases still pending. Essentially, it costs them less to settle the cases and pay people off for their claims than it does to stop selling the stuff. There's the 2D. It's 2,4-D, and that's it's broadleaf weed control. It's the most widely used herbicide in the world. Glyphosate's the most widely used around the house, and it's essentially what's in Agent Orange. There are apparent links between the 2,4-D and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma as a blood cancer and sarcoma. It's classified, it's the one again that was the blank on that list, as possibly carcinogenic to humans. Glyphosate for years was deemed that same way, and then in Europe they've totally banned it, and now it's understood that it's a likely carcinogen. So it's really interesting how these things change. So, we're half an hour in. We've gone through a lot of statistics. First of all, does anyone have any questions? No, we've heard a lot of information.
I had more than one, but the one I can think of is, so I grow specific habitat plants for at-risk native pollinators, and recently had to run outside to catch a true green. My neighbor, our properties abut each other, so it's really unclear as to who's.
Yeah.
Anyway, saved all my open winter seed sowing jugs from being sprayed, and called True Green, and actually got called 2 times, because one time they called me because they thought I wanted long hair. And I got the really quick answer that yes, we used Talstar, and looked up the ingredients, and so that wasn't a question, that was just my anecdote. And I'm on the board of my conservation trust in Littleton, so I'm trying to figure out how to.
I'm gonna interrupt because I think it's a great story. I'm gonna address what we can do at the end, and I want you to remember your anecdote and your question about neighbors and how we can act to educate people without being intrusive and without violating people's rights to do what they want to do on their property. It's a great point.
And my question is,
yep.
Because of invasive work and work that I do, I'm just always searching for alternatives to cutting and dabbing, bittersweet, and all the recalcitrant stuff. Maybe basically in the conservation world, we use tripropyr or glyphosate, like very judiciously dabbed on the bittersweet and whatever it is, and knotweed, the most challenging ones. And I don't know, to save biodiversity, we have to work on this, but
Let's circle back to it. It's a great point, and don't let me forget to get back to it. So what's the effect of all this? Why do we care? Okay, we have our health, we have all these other things that we care about. We care for, at the very least, because of what's happening with insects. Insects are essentially the building block of the earth. The microbiome of the soil is what we rely on to live. Literally, it's what grows our crops. Insect abundance down 45% in the last 40 years, but it's very, very hard to see. It's one of these things they talk about. There's these headlight tests that people do when they remember being a kid and going for a drive home from Arlington to Belmont. I grew up in Belmont, and man, the windshield just covered in moths. I remember playing Little League in Belmont and seeing the big lights and seeing them and just shh, and you never see that anymore. You drive somewhere and maybe 1 or 2 bugs on the windshield. You just don't see it, and it happens really slowly over time. It's very hard to see a lack of bugs. They're obviously tiny. That's the one that I always tell people. Next time you're at a Little League game or a softball game or outside and there's a big light up there, look up and see that it's not covered in moths, because it's not. But no fireflies anymore. They're brown greeters. They are hammered by those granules, okay? They live underground. no fireflies. Honeybees down 90% since 1967. Stunning. Monarch butterflies, 80% reduction since the 90s, and the western monarchs are down 95% since the 1980s. Okay, monarchs eat, what do monarchs eat? We all know. Milkweed. Milkweed are considered horribly a weed to be sprayed, and they're sprayed relentlessly. And when they're sprayed, that's the food source, single food source for the monarchs, for when the caterpillars need to eat those milkweeds. 16 species of firefly in North America now face extinction. 18. I didn't realize there was 18 species of firefly. I see none in Concord. I don't think I've seen maybe one or two. We're lucky enough to have a camp on the vineyard out totally native woods, and the fireflies come out in the summer and it's heaven. It's like something out of a movie. It's absolutely beautiful because it's just wild woods. There's nothing sprayed. 81% of butterflies are down 33% in the last 20 years. There's endless stats on the insect apocalypse. You guys can look it all up. It's essentially really, really bad news. And insects pollinate 75% of the food we eat. And of course, bees, honeybees are number one. And again, as we talked about, insects are the building blocks for life. They are why we're here. So what are the impacts on other species? 7 million songbirds a year die of pesticide poisoning, estimated by eating the granules that they put out on your yard, those little green things. You see them sometimes before it rains. And the birds pick them up. They're soaked in, they basically are the poison, and they eat them. They think they're little seeds, and they die. Of course, that number, I think, also includes agriculture. They put down the seeds that are coated. 3 billion songbirds have been lost since 1970. It's a 30% reduction. 3 billion. It's absolutely staggering. Groundwater contamination. I could give an entire talk about pesticides being found in groundwater. PFAS chemicals are a big issue. We approved $50 million last year to deal with PFAS at town meeting. The lawn chemicals don't just disappear. Every time it rains, all those storm drains that say drain to water, drain to a stream, it all washes off. USGS study showed that at least 2 pesticides in every single stream sampled and at least 1 in every fish sampled in North America. Okay, that's how pervasive these pesticides are. And of course, there's the human health impacts that we already talked about. My mom has Parkinson's. She's in a wheelchair. She grew up on a farm in Kentucky, and she remembers the spraying and the smell of it as a kid. I don't know that that's why she has Parkinson's. She lived in a development in Belmont. She had a condo there, and I watched the lawn care guys go around, and they put these big sacks out on the road. And I was like, what are those sacks? And I went up, and it was the imacloprid. It was a neonic, and it was bags. And they were putting them out so they can put them in the spreaders and spread them all over the property. I don't know that's why she has Parkinson's. I don't know if that's why. I know she has Parkinson's. I know that she talks about being a kid in Kentucky and having this exposure on the farm. Of the 30 common lawn pesticides, this is where it sort of gets unbelievable. 16 probable carcinogens, 12 are linked to birth defects, 21 reproductive effects, 14 are neurotoxic. There was the Parkinson's effect. 25 cause liver damage or kidney damage. 26 are sensitizers or irritants, if you get them on you. And 17 have potential to disrupt the hormonal system. That's of the 30. I didn't list 30. We saw the grid. But that's if you go through all of them. Leukemia rates are consistently elevated amongst children whose parents or caregivers use pesticides at their home and garden. Okay? And I'm not trying to assign blame here or be harsh on neighbors, but it's a direct cause. If you are running around with bare feet, it stands to reason that you are exposing yourself to carcinogenic chemicals that are put on the grass. Low levels of exposure to lawn pesticides are linked to an increased rates of miscarriage, suppression of the nervous system, doctrine, and immune system. A study in cancer causes control suggests that preconception pesticide exposure and possible exposure during pregnancy is associated with childhood brain tumors. All of this is sourced, okay? You guys can look this up. Again, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist. You can just Google it. I'll show the sources at the end and you can see this information. So I wrote an article that came out in the Bridge last week about pollinators. It's Pollinator Week. I know some people on the pollinator committee are here. And Celeste linked my article to this article, which I'd actually never seen before, so I put it up. Researchers find effective pesticides and increased cancer risk comparable to smoking. Okay, if you're exposed to cancer, oops. This is the findings of that article basically extrapolated by me, and I think I have the link up there. So the impact of pesticide had all these effects. The researchers noted positive associations between pesticide use and increased risk of these diseases. It's equivalent to smoking, and the pesticide significantly increased non-Hodgkin's lymphoma case by 154% compared to smoking. Okay, it was higher than smoking. Well, all malignancies, bladder cancers, leukemia showed modest elevations of 19, 20% higher than smoking cigarettes. Okay, we all know that smoking causes cancer. You can see now, and I don't think that's in the US, I think that's from Great Britain, they actually put those horrible impact stickers on packs of cigarettes so you can see what happens if you smoke. But remember, not too long ago, we didn't know that smoking caused cancer, or at least we didn't believe it did, or it wasn't causal. Pets. I have a dog who I love, we love, my family loves. And they absorb the pesticides by chewing and eating plants, also through their paws. And when they're out running around after your yard is sprayed, I don't mean your yard, after a yard is sprayed or a condominium development or wherever it is, they come in and those transfer directly into carpet. Little kids play on carpets. Dogs whose lawns were sprayed, professionally treated with pesticides, significantly higher, 70% higher rates of canine malignant lymphoma in dogs. Okay, it's not like you have a slighter higher chance, you have a 70% higher chance if you have a pet and you spray your yard with one of these services with the dog getting sick. Cats lick their fur. They absorb a lot more if they're outside cats, which I hope you don't have too many outside cats. Hurts the birds, but they lack enzymes in their liver to detoxify, and they're especially vulnerable to chemical exposure. So, what can we do, right? We've heard a lot of bad news. We've all seen these yellow signs. And, what can we do? This is what I do, okay? We don't use anything on our yard. Our yard has clover, it has some moss, it has a mix. We have bunnies. I see Beverly there. She has an awesome pollinator-friendly yard. It does not look like a museum piece yard. It is not perfection of grass like some kind of golf course. It looks different, and it looks, to me, like it's full of life. And when I wrote the column, I was literally sitting on my deck, and I looked out at the yard, and a cottontail rabbit, we have tons of rabbits in the neighborhood right now, hopped out and started eating clover, because we have clover. And some people consider that a weed. So the number one thing you can do is, of course, don't use these things. If you use a yard care company, make sure they're not spreading this stuff. So number one thing you can do is learn. Okay, come to talks like this, research, understand what this stuff is, and then stop using these things. Okay, stop buying them too. Neonics are not available for retail sale in Massachusetts. We'll get to that in just a second, but almost all the other ones are. And if you have a lawn care company, those rules do not apply to them. So, if you don't have time to deal with your yard, or if you have a big yard, you can hire companies that use non-toxic organic solutions. Okay, there's all kinds of things that they can do. So it says the goal of organic and natural lawn care, create a healthy and sustainable environment for your grass plants and family to grow without the use of conventional herbicides, pesticides, and fertilizers, okay? And beware when you're searching for such a company of greenwashing. Beware of the claims. Ask them exactly what's going on in your yard. And one of them, this last one, EcoQuiet, and I have nothing to do with this company, is based right here in Concord, okay? Good Nature is one that I found, Simply Safer, Kid Pet Environmentally Friendly, and Natural Lawn of America. And I checked these as hard as I could check them to make sure that they were exactly what they are. Eco Quiet is a company based right here, and looks like they're growing very rapidly, based here in Concord. So, alternatives for your pesticide-free yard. You can let your yard go wild, right? Rewilding of yards, or a portion of your yard, is growing in popularity. In some places in the United States, they don't allow it. HOA boards won't allow you to do it. Towns won't allow you to do it. But if there's a back part of your yard, you can try it. And ditch the dream of a perfect weed-free lawn. Okay, my daughters go to people's houses and they see a perfect lawn with not a single thing on it other than the grass, and they immediately go, oh, pesticides. Most people take the yellow signs down immediately as soon as the companies put them up. So, not native to its location, grass requires the application of fertilizer, weed control products, irrigation, mowing, all of which can pollute the air. I have grass. I have a yard. It's got all kinds of mixed stuff in there. I use electric and I mow it, and I like a nice tidy lawn. I like trim it, and I like that look afterwards. I like the smell of that clean, that cut grass. So I have not let my yard go completely wild. Electric appliances have gotten tons better. The batteries are incredibly good. I have a small enough yard that I have plug-in for my blower, my trimmer, and my mower. They're all plugged in, and we have solar panels on the roof. Super cool to think that I'm using the sunshine to mow the yard, and I no longer have to deal with the smell and the oil and the gas and the starting and the billowing of the smoke when it gets warmed up. I've had my mower, I bought it on Amazon, I think it was $110. I have a very small yard. I've had it for 6 years without a single problem. Does not have a combustion engine inside it, obviously. So more Americans are letting nature take its course, switching to native plants, meadow grasses, ivy, butterfly gardens, and we know a lot about that. The pollinator group is doing a ton about that. And that's an example of what most people increasingly are seeing as a beautiful yard, rather than the perfect, sort of golf course look. So what are some alternatives? What are some things you can actually do? There are pests, there are things that eat the flowers, there are bugs. I'm not a big fan of mosquitoes and ticks. I don't like them. Those companies that, actually I want to get to that in a second. So DIY natural pesticide, you can use as something as simple as oil. So this is a recipe. Again, I can send this to anyone. 1 cup vegetable oil, you don't need to write this down, you can look it up. 1 tablespoon liquid soap. You apply it to water, and basically the oil smothers the insects. So it's effective on aphids, thrips, mites, and scale. Tomato leaves, I had no idea about this. They are a natural insecticide. So basically you make sort of like a tea. You soak 2 cups of the fresh leaves in a quart of water overnight, strain it and spray, and it kills all kinds of chewing insects, and it attracts beneficials. It also smells awesome. Garlic spray repellent, puree the bulbs of garlic, add water, let it sit overnight, strain it into a jar, there's your vegetable oil and liquid soap. Fill the jar the rest of the way with water, put it in a sprayer, okay, and spray it onto the plants. It repels all these nasty things that really get after your raised bed gardens. And this is the one I use, okay? I don't do a lot of treatment of my raised beds. I just do tomatoes, best bang for the buck, and 1 basil plant. But this works. A gallon of white vinegar, and I have my little vinegar over there. I didn't have the gallon, I thought I did. Salt or Epsom salt, and then a little squirt of liquid dish soap. Okay, you buy one of those sprayers. Mine says organic only because when I'm out in front of my house spraying and I see people go by, they always give me the side eye. So I wrote it on there because they think I'm spraying a pesticide, an herbicide, and I always get the sort of the side eye look. And the benefit of doing this, any Brits in the audience, is your whole yard for about an hour smells like fish and chips.
The other thing is that the deer will enjoy the salt and eat your poison ivy.
Oh, good. I didn't know that. But it kills the weeds dead. It absolutely kills them. And if you spray it on the grass, it kills everything. It's not a weed killer. It's a kills everything killer. So I use it on the stone path in our yard. Mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are no fun, okay? I'm not going to tell you just go for it and live with mosquitoes, but there's all sorts of things you can do. You can eliminate the standing water, thin the brush, build these traps, apply repellent to yourself, and then if you do want to call a company, this company, Oh Dear, is very big, okay? They use natural essential oils. They list the actual ingredients. And they are a clove oil and peppermint oil. Again, it gives a little bit of a smell, and it is very, very effective. Mosquito barrier is another one I found. And then Wondercide. Okay, they were on Shark Tank. I totally forgot I walked out. I have a big thing of the Wondercide. It's, again, cedar oil is the big ingredient that they use to repel mosquitoes and ticks. Ticks, tick tubes. We've got a display in the back. I also see some permethrin right there. Permethrin to spray on your clothes for ticks is what I do when I'm in the outdoors. You have to let it dry. You have to be very careful with it. It's highly toxic. When it's wet, you don't want to get it on you, but once it's dry, it doesn't come over. And the use of permethrin as an effective tick barrier is highly effective on your clothes when you're out walking in the woods. I'm a bow hunter, and I would be, I think, sick with tick disease every season if I didn't have the permethrin on me used in that way. Permethrin sprayed on your entire property and bombing every single insect and killing everything on your property is what we talked about previously with the spraying. There's oil-based treatments, permethrin for your clothes, and then again, Oh Dear is also effective on ticks on the property. Tick tubes we can learn more about in the back. It's kind of an interesting thing. It does take some effort. You essentially trick mice into being the delivery mechanism for the permethrin. You take some fuzz that the mice love, some cotton fuzz, you put it in a tube, spray it with permethrin, hide it like in a wood pile. The mice, oh, this is perfect for building a nest. They take it back to their nest, they build the nest. Once it's dried, it doesn't hurt the mouse. And then the mouse covered in ticks, the white-footed mouse is the #1 vector for deer ticks in Massachusetts. It's not deer. Which is why we love our predators, our foxes and our coyotes, keep those mouse populations down, and it kills every tick on the mouse. The mouse is, again, the #1 vector. So you have, by tricking them into using the bedding soaked in permethrin, essentially made them vehicles for reducing the tick populations on your property. Sounds crazy that would be effective, but for those who have tried tick tubes, it's highly effective. So mass regulations, good news, right? We've talked a lot about bad news. Good news here in Massachusetts. In 2021, we became the first state in the country to have regulations, laws that restricted the use of neonics that negatively impact bees and pollinators, okay? That's for residential use. You can go into Home Depot and you can buy all sorts of stuff to spray everywhere, but none of it has the neonic pesticides in it. This does not apply to lawn care companies or licensed professionals. 6 years of advocacy it took to get there here in Massachusetts. Beekeepers, legislators, they all came together. They pounded on the state's pesticide board subcommittee, and they made it a restricted use product, which made it was not available for sale for residential use. Handful of other states, but Massachusetts was the first to ban them. There's like 6 states that have regulations to limit them, public areas, that sort of thing, but Massachusetts was first. And again, the bad news, it only applies to people like us, pesticide applicators, farmers exempted, and it only applies to neonics. There's all kinds of other pesticides that they're allowed to use. Federal regulations. So the EPA has been tasked, best available science, to regulate the pesticides. So this agency that banned DDT has evolved into a more timid regulator that has not kept pace with the rest of the world to protect the health of people and wildlife. That's a little editorial by me, okay? This is sort of commonly understood, and we can understand why, knowing the political climate of the United States right now. In 2019, the US used 70 agricultural pesticides that were banned in the European Union, amounting to 322 million pounds of the 1 billion used each year. A third of the pesticides you're not allowed to use in Europe. And I'll explain why. In Europe, the litmus test for deciding if it's dangerous is you have to demonstrate that it's safe. In the United States, you have to demonstrate that it's not safe. And to do that, you have to show cause. And cause takes a long time to build up that evidence. You have to have studies and everything else. So they approach it in the opposite way. In the European Union, it has to be safe. You have to prove that it's safe. In the United States, you have to prove 100% that it causes harm, cancer. It's a very high bar. Concord. So what regulations do we have? The Recreation Department does not use pesticides outdoors on school property, school buildings, playground equipment, and we also do not use any pesticides on our parks, ride out and everything else, okay? They put granules down sometimes. Every time I see them, I cringe, I call them, they said it's just fertilizer, it is not pesticides. I know that if you go over to Cousins, it's covered in dandelions, and that's always a great sign for me. You know, dandelions used to be a food source, big time. Every part of the dandelion is used. They have like one serving of dandelion greens used to be on salads. They used to be like loved, and for some reason, once yards became something that we didn't want anymore.
Dandelion wine.
Dandelion wine, yeah.
Yep, there was a little Italian woman who used to come by every single summer.
Yep.
Pick all the dandelions and then create wine.
Yep. And then the Mass General Law says pesticide will not be indoors while children are on the property of a school, daycare, et cetera, et cetera. And other than that, I couldn't find any other regulations on the books here in Concord. Okay, Massachusetts law says you can't buy neonics, the bee killers, but you can still spray them if you hire a lawn care company. And that's just what I could find here in Concord. So here's the real punchline. You know, what could we do here? New York City in April of last year banned synthetic pesticide use on all city property. Maui banned them again. I should update this is last August from all county lands, basically the entire island of Maui. Baltimore banned the neonics and glyphosate from all public and private property in the city of Baltimore. No more Roundup for the city. You could, you know, of course, you could drive somewhere and get it, but you can't buy it. And South Portland, Maine was this really interesting case. I have a buddy who lives in South Portland, and when I went up there, they had all these signs on the yards saying, pollinator safe yard, another pollinator safe yard, pass whatever it was, warrant article blank. And I looked it up and I researched it, and essentially South Portland, Maine banned pesticide use. They have a rolling sort of approach where they, you know, in year one, it's not, you're not getting a big fine, no one's going to throw you in jail. And then as it goes, it gets farther and farther up. They touted the measure as a history-making effort because South Portland's the largest of more than 25 communities in Maine that restricted the use of pesticides in some way. But South Portland actually passed a residential ban of the application of pesticides by anyone in the town, which is the only one I think I could find that did it. So, in closing, what could we do here? Okay, I know I talked about it that we just passed warrant article 36, which is a home rule petition regarding the use of anticoagulant rodenticides. If you went to town meeting, that passed by a huge majority. It doesn't ban the use of those black boxes that the chipmunks and everything go into, and then they go flop around. The owls eat them at night, and the owls all die. It doesn't ban them, but it basically instructs the select board to petition the state to allow us to make our own rule to ban them. Massachusetts has a law that no town can ban something that supersedes state law. And I didn't understand why, and a lot of it has to do with the railroad that comes through Concord. It has to do with power lines. They want the ability to spray herbicides along power lines that go through communities. And if the town were to ban that, it would cause a big disruption. The train comes through here that goes right behind our house, and they spray, I think it's dicamba, right off the side of a truck that goes along the tracks. And for 10 feet on either side when they do it, everything is dead. They need the ability to do that, they say, because it would be too cost prohibitive to go and cut every weed and pull it up. That law in Massachusetts is now under threat, and there are a whole group, it started out in Hopkinton, that are trying to pass the ability for towns to regulate these types of rules regarding pesticides, insecticides, and rodenticides, because this came up in the research. I was on the steering committee for Article 36. And if that happens, we have a game changer. It will allow us to pass a rule, if we wanted to, hint, hint, to step outside the state rules regarding the banning of residential use of pesticides. And it can be done. You can file a petition, but they probably wouldn't just allow that to go through based on the home rule petition, just asking them to. But if other communities did it, or if this law is passed that rescinds that ability rescinds the prohibition of us from doing that, suddenly all bets are off, which would be really interesting. And I know that the pollinator subcommittee here in Concord is here today. Resources for you that I used for today's talk are Beyond Pesticides is a huge national organization. They have tons of information. You can download PDFs, sheets to print. They have whole kits for communities who want to address this issue. They are big-time advocates for the banning of these pesticides. Another one is the Pollinator Partnership. Okay, the websites are right there. And of course, right here in Concord, we have the Pollinator Health Advisory Committee. And Isabel's here. We have a group of people who are dedicated to this cause right here in Concord. We have a table that goes up on Ag Day. I say we, I guess I'm not officially on the Pollinator Committee, but I'm an honorary member, and they do a lot of great things, like they were here tonight setting up this table in the back, and the whole goal of the Pollinator Committee you can read about on the website, but it's essentially to make people aware of the impact and negative impacts to pollinators and the importance on preserving pollinators. Bats, butterflies, bees are the big three. And moths. So here's some of my sources. Again, they're not in any order, but you can just click on them all and be absolutely deluged with information. More sources, tons of them. And this has been exactly an hour, so I wanted to make sure that we have time for questions. My goal is that I hope you learned something tonight. I know that a lot of these facts are daunting, but this is a hidden threat that lives right here amongst us. It is on the yards all around us. And I know I don't want to attack a neighbor, or when you're going through a neighborhood, you see the signs. It disturbs me that people might not know what's happening. I don't think anyone is intentionally poisoning their children or their dogs or themselves. I don't think anyone wants to hire a company to come put poison on their yard and increase their own chance of getting lymphoma in 10 years or 20, or my mom being on a farm when she's a girl and having Parkinson's right now and is in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. It's a death sentence. I don't think anyone is doing it on purpose. I think people don't know. And if they at least would ask what's happening and at least are aware through these kinds of talks, I think we can make some changes. They're all alternatives. No one likes ticks. I'm not saying we should just forget about prevention. No one likes mosquitoes. And a lot of people don't like yards that look like my yard or Beverly's yard. They want perfection. Or I shudder to think what Stefan's yard looks like. But all joking aside, understanding the dynamics of aesthetics is really important. And I think when people say you have to rewild your yard and turn it into just an overgrown home, that's going pretty far. I think when people put in butterfly gardens, it can take a step. And I think the other side of that are these monoculture yards that have nothing alive in them. The actual biome of the soil is designed to be dead and only to grow the grass that's been planted there. Everything else is dead. And then I wonder about the moral responsibility when it rains, when people put this on their grass, or a company comes without their knowledge and they spray it down, and some percentage of all those granules wash right into the drain, into the Assabet, and into the Sudbury, which becomes the Concord, which goes into the ocean. I wonder about that, and I wonder about Concord being a leader in so many ways, and being a leader in thinking and in thoughts through the history of Concord, and people taking brave steps, like they would just, hopefully are going to ban escars and the use in Concord. I wonder what we could do. Janet.
How about a few of us go talk to the folks who run the garden tour, because the museum has this really, really impressive garden tour. And I know this year, one of the properties, I don't know which one, had a lot of penstemon, that she had a focus on pollinators.
The one on Monument Street.
I think it was, yeah. And I noticed Isabel's training to make jugs terraria sunk in, because this woman had 10 of them. I counted them. I looked Beard's Tongue, Penston, and so on. So there's some ability of the Concord Garden Tour people to partner with this, but I think we could make the message much more explicit. So I think
Yeah.
we ought to have a little tete-a-tete with them.
I think the more people that know about this, the better. One of the things I have learned, and again, Sven with the leaf blower ban, I sat down, had coffee with him, and I said, how'd you do it? And he said, you have to take it in pieces. You can't say we have to all have wild yards and all have butterfly gardens everywhere and stop cutting our grass. You can't say you can, nothing can go on your grass. You have to start off by saying, in my opinion, for yards, do you understand the dangers of the chemicals that are being applied to your grass? And that is mostly by lawn care companies. I think if there's a garden committee and they talk about native species, again, that's a whole nother subject, invasive plants that get pulled up. A lot of plants that people buy, and if you go to Home Depot, they're allowed to sell the plants that have the neonic granules in them. And you see these little stickers that say, this plant is infused with neonics. And so a lot of times, like the Garden Club, when people buy plants from companies, larger companies that come in from out of state, those plants are grown. Essentially what you're doing is planting a systemic pollinator bomb on your property. And that's something I don't think people understand, the systemic nature of the products. They go into the plant, the pollen becomes toxic to the bees.
And people think you're saving a lot of money by buying from the big box stores, but the prices might be less, but that's what they're getting.
Yeah, they're cheaper to grow because they don't have to fend off bugs because the plants are toxic. Isabel?
So I actually want to do the neighborhood effect by having people take the survey for an ecosystem habitat and then purchase for $5, or if you can't afford it, I'll give it to you free, pollinator pathway sign. And so that your neighbor said, if you put it out, your neighbor says, what is this? Or they're like, if we start to see it through the town, I bought 100 of them so we could get them out. The other question the woman had is, the Xerces Science organization says, if your neighbor is spraying and you haven't, had a conversation and they're going to continue, you create a barrier so it doesn't drift to your property. And, you can say, if you can't stop, then I would need to put a barrier up so it doesn't drift onto my property.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough issue. This issue of what you do when you see a neighbor who has the signs up, the yellow signs. So I like the idea of these signs, and in Portland, that's what I remember and why I looked it up. So I don't know what your sign, the pollinator pathway sign, looks like.
Back here, it's just pollinator pathway, but you get it because you complete this out.
There it is. Sandeep's got it.
You say you're
Held
going
up.
to reduce not use pesticides, increase, there's 5 things. And the survey is very easy, there's a link.
So you essentially take a pledge, you agree to some of the things we've talked about to not do it, and then you get a sign. I love that idea. I like the idea. I've wondered about making a pamphlet and going at night into the mailboxes of people that have the signs up, not to shame them or to accuse them of causing harm, because you have to be careful with doing that, but to make them aware of what it is. I don't think people understand. The other thing I wanted to mention, I forgot to mention it, is the prevalence of these pesticides in condominium developments and business parks. Concord Green, where maybe some of you live, they hammer the entire property with all that water and everything else. Yeah, I bet you are. Pamela Dritt is probably all over it. Business parks, they hire a company, and rental units. In our neighborhood, there's 3 or 4 rental units, and they're multi-dwelling units. I assume they're owned by someone else. What the owners of the property do is just contract for yard care, and that typically includes yard treatment, and they don't say what it is. Condo developments, I live over by Domino Drive. That entire development is treated, and I had to take my dog to the vet yesterday for a checkup, and I meant to put it in, but I can show you on my phone. I took a picture right in front of it used to be Domino Vet, it's now West Concord Vet. Awesome vet place, by the way. I'll give them a plug. The ground looks like something out of a horror movie. It is dead. It is dead. There's a few scruffy weeds, there's patches of dirt everywhere, and I can walk up there and just see the chemicals when they put them out, the pellets. So that's something to think about also. If you live in a condo development and you're on the HOA board or you want to get on the HOA board, educate, instruct, show that there are alternatives. If it costs $12 more a year for them to hire O'Deere or a company like that, again, I have nothing to do with that company, or one of that quiet landscaping companies that will use a naturally occurring a product and not use the quick and dirty nasty stuff, pay that extra money, make those demands. Okay, you're paying HOA fees, and they should be held accountable for what's happening. I saw another question. You talked about a barrier of, or you were asking about a barrier of how you block the drift from a neighbor.
I wish. I can't imagine. And I'm not convinced that essential oils are safe
You're not.
for native, like,
We're going to go safer.
I know, I mean, I just looked up on O'Deere's site, and they do say, like, this kills any insect that comes into contact with.
Yep.
And a big part of what's in jeopardy right now are native, like, we used to have 12 species or 11 species of native bumblebees, and now we're down to 9, and 2 are almost extirpated, so we're actually and we're losing a lot of plants, and plants are actually
Yeah.
the bottom of the web, right?
It's a real quandary. This issue of how do you, so equine encephalitis is bad news. Mosquitoes are bad news. People get sick, and I have friends who spray their yard, and they said we do because we have 2 children who are really allergic to mosquito bites. They get giant swelling, and we have no choice. I don't think that it's a perfect solution going with a company that's spraying your trees down with something that kills everything. I think it's a better solution. There is always going to be cases where, for whatever reason, ticks are bad news. People do not like getting sick. Alpha-gal is big on the vineyard right now. It's this Lone Star ticks are coming in, and it causes people to get extremely ill. Lyme disease is now nothing compared to some of these things. So I don't think that there's a perfect solution. I do think that people should be aware of the dangers of what is commonly used and when these alternatives are not used. And people should have those discussions with their lawn care companies.
Well, I think we all need to be personally concerned about how we dress and checking for ticks constantly.
Sure, 100%, yeah.
You have more biodiversity, you actually have potentially have less ticks than mosquitoes, because you have the bats.
Yep.
You have more animals, and more diversity to bring balance.
You're right about talking about a holistic approach. Bat boxes are really important. People talk about pollinators, they just talk about honeybees, but having bat boxes and putting them up, I read the statistic, I think bats eat like 1,000 mosquitoes an hour or something. It's incredible. Dragonflies eat them, 100 a day. Having the birds eat the bugs means that the birds aren't being poisoned. The holistic approach is the right one. The question I always have is if it gets too big, you lose the audience, and you need to start small. And people that have more knowledge sometimes are hit with a burden regarding things like dabbing of. I know this sounds a little detailed, but Phragmites are a scourge. Does anyone know what Phragmites are? Okay, they are a scourge in a wetland all over New England. They are a reed that was used for weaving. It came over into our ecosystem from somewhere in Asia, and it takes over aquatic ecosystems. It's nasty, it's highly invasive, and the way to kill it is to cut it and then dab the tips with glyphosate with Roundup. It's in an aquatic environment. The reason you don't spray it is because then you're getting that into the environment. You dab the tips. And you have to balance. You're saying, well, we're using Roundup or the 4DW, the 2DW stuff. We're using that stuff, but it is effective on getting rid of a horrible scourge of a plant. And so you have these quandaries. And in my opinion, these quandaries spell towards going for the big things, going for the easy things. When you have a neighbor who's spraying their yard with yard chemicals and they don't understand, you don't want to confront them. You don't want to have bad feelings. What I did is I talked to my neighbor and I said, hey, I want to talk to you about something. And I'm concerned. Our daughters run through your yard. And he had no idea. He didn't push back. He didn't say, oh, you're crazy. I like my yard. His yard looked horrible. Beverly knows who I'm talking about. He had no idea. He didn't understand what he was paying for. He also found out that his mother, who's since passed away, had it on her credit card, and he went back and looked, and she had been paying $86 a month for 11 years. And he had no idea. So, you had a question?
So I've seen this a few times, like on Instagram. It's like a mosquito trap where you get a 5-gallon bucket.
Right here.
Oh, okay.
That whole demo.
So
Yep.
effective?
Yes, right
Okay,
here.
okay.
Yeah, they have a full demo in the back of these traps, and they're very effective.
That seems too easy.
Yeah.
Like a half a dumps in it. Right, okay.
There's all kinds of ways to knock them down. I mean, the biggest thing is look on your property for any standing water, an overturned bucket, anything. A wheelbarrow that has a little water in the bottom, it'll be full of mosquito larvae. I saw more questions. Sandeep, I think you had one earlier. Oh, you don't? Yeah.
I'm just going to highlight that with nationwide companies that provide services for applying these types of lawn care and pesticide application. Most of them are owned by private equity companies. Most of them target certain populations for exactly what you were talking about, these monthly services. I know more than I'd like to about the industry. And yes, they will use basically the worst chemicals that they legally can because they kill everything, so they appear to be effective. So, I think everyone in this room, you have more power than these companies because if all that they know about what is being sprayed on the yard is what these companies are telling them through very aggressive advertising practices, you as their neighbor, if you do talk to your neighbor, it's like that is more powerful than what some aggressive marketing company can say. So if you have the opportunity to talk to neighbors or friends or family, and if people learn about that, maybe it spreads. Then someone will be like, oh yeah, I talked to someone who mentioned that maybe some of these aren't great for pets. Even that word of mouth is powerful.
100%. And 100%. I mean, it's very tricky. It's very tricky to go up to knock on a door and say, hey, do you know you're poisoning your children or your dogs and your pets or poisoning me? And you're accusing them of doing some sort of systemic harm to the environment when they don't know or believe that they are, or believe that the trade-off on having their yard treated and having nothing on it, looks perfect, it looks like a golf course, is well worth whatever invisible effects might occur. Education is super important, and having these conversations gently in the right way is super important. Or we all get together and we figure out a way to do something about it as a town. And that's something that right now is not allowed. Okay, we cannot do that. Go, Stefan, yeah.
I think it's both and. It's really not one
Or both, yeah, good point. Good point. Janet.
I came in late, so I don't know if you mentioned birds, but there's been a severe drop in the population of birds.
We did talk about that, yeah. Songbird populations are down 30% nationwide.
The bird people, bird watchers should be a fertile ground to work with.
Yep.
Maybe we could partner with them.
Yeah.
Birding is getting more popular, I would say, with younger, stressed out millennials.
Yeah.
Who may not be aware of pesticides or
Yeah, but think back to that show, we're gonna wrap up here, but think back to that show of hands we did at the beginning, okay? Almost every single person in this room knows someone who's dealt with cancer. And I'm not saying that because we walk around on yards or play Frisbee when we were 18 on a yard that was just sprayed is because we got cancer. I don't know. I do know that there is an increasing body of evidence. Remember, DDT was heralded as a miracle. A miracle. There's videos you can find online of neighborhoods with kids running behind the fogging trucks, driving through neighborhoods, and they're pumping out DDT in gas form into neighborhoods. There's videos of people being hit with, covering themselves with DDT. And it was deemed safe. Glyphosate for 20 years Roundup was deemed totally safe. My mom told me that she thinks she might have sprayed all of our yard in Belmont with the poison ivy with Roundup and got it all over her hands. And she wonders if that's why. I think it haunts her. I think it will haunt all of us. As the science progresses, as people rise up, and we just saw it the other day in downtown Concord on a much bigger level, we are the heroes. People have power. And if we can get together as a town, whether it's through the pollinator committee or if we watch this mass law, people after this talk I gave at Concord can say, why don't you start doing it? And I said, well, right now as Stefan said, it's about educating and preparing for a time when we're allowed to. There's reasons why right now we can't as a town. We could do a home rule petition like the Escars did. But this is a much bigger one. Lawn care is a big industry. It would be a big battle. But stand by if it starts to happen. I want all of you guys on the front lines. Yes?
If you could put a flyer in a box with a couple dollars attached to it, people would help me read it.
Yeah, just bribe people with cash or a cold beer on a summer night. Door to door with a cold beer. Hey, can we have a conversation? Yes?
Are you willing to share your
Of course.
slides?
Yeah, I'll email it to anyone. We're also being recorded by Minuteman.
Yeah, but I live in Acton. and
Okay.
I live in a condominium.
Yeah.
And some of those chemicals, I'm sure,
Oh,
are
yeah.
being used.
Yep. And if anyone knows, I'm happy to give this talk. It's the least I feel like I can do. I put this slide deck together and reprised it after Concord Can last year. If you have a group in a library, I'm happy to go anywhere. And again, I am not a scientist. I'm not a chemical engineer. I'm just a dad doing research and wanting to make people aware.
Sorry, boss.
Yep.
So, our library in Littleton was just built several years ago, and I'm in charge of this giant slope that was seeded. I'm pretty much the only volunteer taking care of it. We'd love to have you come there, and it's ridiculous. But right across the street now, it's really funny in contrast because a senior center was just built, and so it's pristine. I don't know how this happened, and the conversation, they didn't get the memo, but it looks like McDonald's, and it's perfect, and across the street is all native, and
Yep.
I'm doing a tour there as part of the.
Well, let me know. I'd be happy to come, and if you want to put it together, I'd be happy to come speak
Roger there too.
anywhere to anyone. Janet?
Part of the value of a home rule petition is the education, the knowledge that's transmitted during a somewhat futile operation. And I say
Oh, Jan,
that.
I think positive.
People agonize over home rule petitions in town meeting. First of all, it's a home rule petition, it's going to go to the House, they're going to ignore it, you might as well vote for it, unless it's horrible, usually I haven't seen one that is. And it's gonna come around again anyway, when you get to enact it as a town, if that ever happens. So, but what happens during that exercise of presenting a town home rule petition, even though it's probably going to go to the House and die, and you just do it again in 2 years,
Yeah,
is the education.
yeah,
We passed RCV this time really fast. At least as many people as voted for it before. Thank you, Stefan, for your presentation. Because people understood it. If you gave this talk over and over and over again, people, they hear the message. So,
yeah. It's a good point.
anybody who's willing to go out and try it, go ahead. And the League of Women Voters, I would be the point person, would be happy to help you work through the process. I worked with the Escar people. They did a classic textbook process They were fabulous.
Yeah, I was on that steering committee. I think it's one that has to be thought through. The equine encephalitis is a real issue. Mosquito spraying is a real problem for some people. Tick-borne disease is a real problem. But I agree with you that it probably can be done if it's done the right way. And I agree they did a textbook job. Megan and Gwen knocked it out of the park.
I just wanted to say, I'm inspired to go and try again with my neighbors, and since they have 2 dogs, I'll use their dogs as.
Yes.
So thank you for the inspiration.
I wanted to close on one point. First of all, I can send this slide to anyone. You can come up afterwards, get me your email, whatever it is. Coming here tonight, hey Janet, I'm just going to wrap up. Coming here tonight is hugely important, okay? You guys took time out of your evening, you came down, you sat and listened to this for an hour. You didn't have to, okay? And it's the first step. And I want to thank you guys for coming tonight and listening. And yeah, we can wrap up. I hope people will mill around, and I'm happy to send this deck to anyone. And if anyone has any other venues that they'd like me to present this at, I'm happy to. And if you haven't read the pollinator-centric piece in the bridge that I wrote last week, it's very similar to this, just in a more prose form. So thank you guys very much for coming.